Hi everybody, Joel from JST Woodcraft here. Welcome to my shop. So I recently posted a video, or actually a picture, up on the Facebook around this new product that's kind of been around, I think, for quite a long time actually, but it's new to the wood churning world. It's called Liquid Diamonds. It's a pretty neat resin product, and I got a bottle of it, or two bottles because it's part A and part B, and did some fun casting to just play with it. And so, so far, very much like Alumilite. Two things that are not like Alumilite with this product are, one, you do not need a pressure pot to work with it, and two, it has about a 24-hour cure time. So, interesting from a production perspective, not quite sure. I would be wanting to do hundreds of castings with this on the label casting side. But certainly in this space, doing these hybrids or, just colored blanks, I think it could be pretty cool. One of the things that is interesting is it takes it about 30 minutes of open time. So you have lots of time to get your stuff ready, to play and to set up. You do have to wait. You certainly don't want to mix your colors and your stuff too soon, or things will start to settle out and you're not going to get a good outcome. I have only done 1-2 pours with this now, so I'm still trying to understand where that line is, 30 seconds to 2 minutes before you can't work with it anymore, so that I can get the color mixes well. I can tell you, up to this point, very low odor. There's a small odor. I don't smell Alumilite. Some people say they do. Some people say they don't smell this. Smell a little bit. Totally tolerable. Nothing like PR. Nothing like the polyester resin, which just, everybody knows, just really strong odor. Other things I've noticed, when I drilled this out, crazy soft. So it's going to be very interesting to turn this on the lathe. I got nice ribbons coming out of it when I drilled it. And it drilled really soft, and the drill bit came out of the other end very soft. So this is not a brittle product whatsoever. We'll see how this works when we churn. The last thing I want to comment on is it's very, very much like water from a viscosity perspective. So when I'm using this, I'm thinking, man, if I need a material that's going to really penetrate into a wood or a hybrid and really fill in the crevices, this is probably a little better than some of the other products that might set up a little faster and not have the opportunity to soak into what it is. So we've got a nice little wedge here of Chitim burl, and we'll see how well this bonds. The wood does go all the way to the tube on this end, even though it doesn't look like it here. There is tube. It's all the way down there. So we should be able to turn this and keep some wood. And we've got some interesting pattern in here with the white and the Pearl X that I put in. So we'll see how this turns out. And I'll see how much talking I can do over the lathe and the dust control system as we do this. And we'll see the finished result. So let's do this. I generally spin my lathe around 3,000 RPM when I'm doing plastic stuff or resins, so we'll see how this goes. Feel is definitely a softer material than you would get in Alumilite, and certainly softer than a PR resin. Not brittle at all. have this tubed up for the Southwest Mesa kit, or Mesa kit. I like the long barrel on that. Shows off pieces like this. This stuff is really soft, and I can break up the pieces with my hands, and really easy to work with. Right. So take a pause here, see how the wood is turning out. Wood looks good. Materials turning nice, no voids, no bubbles that I can tell. So all right, let's get this down to our bushings. I like to use my skew to get close, and then I usually switch over to my CI3 carbide to do the last little bits. I feel like with the carbide I don't have as much jumping around as I move from one end to the other. This stuff is really soft. It's like truly is like churning a piece of butter. Having to spend more time up here on the wood side. The wood doesn't come off as fast. I'm right at my bushing here. Just a little off here. Leave some room for sanding. Going to get some of this off here. All right. I will tell you, this stuff is a joy to turn. I mean, that stuff just turns down so fast. Really, really impressed with that. So we'll fire the lathe back up here and move on to the sanding phase and see how well this stuff sands down and polishes up. starting with a little bit of 80 grit just to get me down to where I want to be quickly. I tend to watch for little areas like this. These are the areas where I'm a little shallow, high spot, low spot, and I'm just going to keep moving the sandpaper back and forth until I have a uniform kind of white sheen here, and that lets me know that I'm level. In addition to using this to get me down to my bushings. So as I go back and forth, you'll start to see those little round areas, those little circle areas, or whatever you want to call them, disappear. And that's a good indication that I've worked all the bumps out and turning. Generally, I would have a little more time with the carbide tool to get some of these divots out, but the stuff is so soft, it came off much quicker than I'm used to. Alright, we're good here. We'll move on to the Abranet pads here. This is 180. Abranet strips, not pads. Sorry about that. Alright. And then 240. Like I've said in other videos, I love this Abranet so it lasts, seems like forever. It's not cheap, but you get a lot of mileage out of it. So I think in the end, you're ahead of the game. 320. Pretty smooth. 400. And 500. And you notice I'm not having to spend a whole lot of time here. Yeah, it feels good. There we are with our rough sanding, and that looks quite nice. So I generally don't like to wet sand wood because that causes, or could cause problems, could pull up some fibers. So what I'm going to do is I have these other sanding pads here. They're also, well, they're Abralon, not Abranet, sorry. And they're just, you know, it's 500, 1000, 2000, 4000. So I'm going to go through these, finish with 4000, and then instead of wet sanding and polishing the plastic part of this, we'll just move right to a CA finish. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I have tremendously slowed the lathe down. We're down to about 1300 RPM. It's the slowest setting I can have with this belt configuration. You do want to be careful with these higher grits. They generate a lot of heat really fast and can melt your blank and could also do damage to the pads. So you don't want to do a lot of pressure. You don't want to spend a lot of time. And if you don't trust me on what happens with these things in heat, well, there's a whoops. I was turning a very small piece, melted the pad, melted the piece. Not cool. So short bursts of pressure, lots of movement. You really want to feel for things starting to get sticky or hot. You hear me say this in almost every video, heat is your enemy here. Okay, so you can see we've got a really nice finish on here. That looks really good. So we're gonna take a pause here in the video. I'm gonna reconfigure for a CA application, and I'll be right back. All right, so we've reconfigured the lathe for doing CA finish. I've got these CA bushings on here. If you don't have these, I highly recommend you get a pair. or a couple. They work so great. They keep the tube away from the CA. You don't end up with a piece stuck to your bushings, and it just gives you a nice finish. I am a big fan of the Mercury Adhesives Flex products. So we're going to be doing, I think, about 5 coats of thin and 2 or 3 coats of medium on the end. We will be using some of their aerosol accelerator in between each coat. Very little bit. 1 little spray is all you need. And then last thing we'll do is we will wet sand and polish the adhesive. I've got the lathe turned down now to where I can get as low as I think 230 RPM. We'll probably do this around 400. It's a good speed. You don't want to go too fast with your CA finish, or you can end up with these concentric rings, and it's a nightmare to sand it down, and it throws CA glue all over the place. Big hairy sticky mess. So keep it slow, keep it simple. And I think that's all we need to discuss in the setup, so let's get this finish started. So I like to just take a piece of a shop cloth, I cut it up into little strips, and then I'm going to fold it a couple times, keeps it off of my fingers. And I'm actually going to go one more. End up with a nice thick piece so that you don't end up with a bunch of glue all over. Get a little bit of glue on there, a little CA, and back and forth real quick. Do a little bit more here because it's such a long piece. Back and forth real quick, and then a little spray. And that's all we need. That stuff dries. The CA will dry really, really fast. So I do a double fold. Give my blank a little bit of a wipe. Make sure there isn't any of the accelerator on there. Do another fold and another batch of the thin. I like to do this two-fold process. One, I like to feel that this lets me feel that the CA is actually dry, and also make sure there's no residue from the accelerator, which could cause a blooming or little white patches underneath the finish. I got a little rough spot down here. Okay, that's all right. Finish that up later. Okay, that's all we're going to do on the thin side. Now we're going to move to the medium. Same process, but you will notice the medium is substantially thicker than the thin. You want to make sure you're keeping your cloth moving. You're moving it quickly, and if you feel the slightest bit of resistance, you pull it back. If you don't, you're going to end up with your cloth adhered to your tube or your piece, and you're going to have to start this whole process all over again. Last little bit. Okay. That is it for the medium. Now you're not going to end up with a smooth surface here, but you shouldn't have huge ridges, and it should look pretty good pattern. And as you can see, it's already starting to take on kind of a polished sheen here. So the next step is to get all of these little ridges, which are probably hard to see in the camera, but there's tiny little bumps, imperfections from the cloth and just the application in general. I like to do this part by hand. I feel like if I'm going too fast on the lathe, I can't see what's happening. So I just take a piece of my 500 and I just slowly go back and forth. And what I'm watching for is the disappearance of all the shiny parts. And that tells me that I have sanded everything to the same height. And I understand we're talking about microscopic height here, but height is height. And the smoother you are when you start here, the smoother you're going to be when you finish your sanding process. You end up with a really nice, pretty shine, hard plastic, glass-like finish. And that's our goal in this whole process. So again, you can do this with the lathe spinning. I don't know that it helps to get it any better. You can't really see it as easily as you can with the when you're doing it this way, and you have the risk of generating heat, pushing too hard, and pulling your whole finish right off the part. This is especially important if you're dealing with pieces of wood that are oily, and you may not have the best adhesion between the CA and the wood piece. When you're doing dry sanding, obviously you're generating a lot of friction. Okay, so I think that looks great. Now we are going to switch over to getting our wet sanding ready. Alright, so we're all set up now to do our wet sanding. I like to use the micro mesh pads. These come in like business card size pads, and then half business card size pads, or maybe a little bigger. I take the pads, put them on my bandsaw, I cut them in half, so I get 2 sets. Lasts 6 months to a year. These things last really long if you keep them clean and take care of them, let them dry out appropriately. We're starting at 1500. They're color coded. If you have a better memory than I have, you can remember the colors and the grits. I just take a Sharpie and write the grit number on there. So as you can see, we're starting at 1500 and going up to 12,000. We're going to wet sand, keep the temperature down. I use these condiment bottles that I get on Amazon for most of the liquids that I use in the shop. So this is going to help us to keep the moisture flowing and the blank wet. So let's get started. Now when I'm doing this, I like to spend a little extra time on the first 3 grits. I find that gets me a better shine. I think it just takes down stuff a little better. So a little bit of water goes a long way, and I am just going to keep this moving back and forth and back and forth. And basically what I'm looking for is a little white build up there at the very edge where the sandpaper meets the blank, and that shows me that I'm getting nice slurry here of material coming off. And we're just going to keep working this back and forth. Obviously, the bigger the blank, the more time you need to spend. Roughly speaking, I'm going to do the first 3 about 45 seconds each, until I see a really crazy white slurry, and then the rest we will go to 30 seconds each. You can also tend to feel when you first start this, the sand has kind of a rough, sandpaper has a rough feel to it, and then as it starts to work, it gets soft. So now I can feel sandpaper working. Again, just back and forth, trying to make sure that my sanding is even as possible. Heat distribution is as little as possible. We're actually distribute heat as much as possible and not having too much heat generated in one spot. Now 2400. Add a little more water here. Next grid is 32. Six. $4,000. $6,000. $8,000. And then last but not least, $12,000. You can notice really starting to get a shine line here, giving us some indication that we were getting a nice polish on this CA finish. Okay, I'm going to get myself a clean rag. Make sure we got this all nice and dry, good and clean. like to use this one-step plastic polish. I think it really does a great job in giving you a final finish. Some might say it's not necessary. It may not be. We all have our little processes that we follow. I just apply it with my finger and make sure I've got it rubbed in and a nice coating on there. I'm going to come back, just wipe my finger off, and where I wipe my finger off, I'm just going to apply a little bit of pressure. Make sure that polish is really working its way onto the material and really giving it a good buff. Now, because I have the lathe set up for a CA finish, this is as fast as it can go right now, which is 800. I'm just going to fold this over to a clean spot and go here. If I was configured for maybe doing a different type of blank, like a full acrylic, and not have to slow this down for the CA, I would turn the speed up a little bit now, but not necessary here. Alright, so we got our CA finish on, and I would say this stuff churns nice. It churns soft and easy. It takes a great shine. Of course, the polish here is the CA finish, but I'm pretty confident that I could have just used the micro mesh pads and pulled a nice shine off that. I'll have to try that in another video where we don't do the CA finish. We just do a traditional plastic polishing. But I think this looks really nice. It's going to look really good on the pen. Beautiful finish. Got some nice transitions here. It's kind of like, you know, a little bit of earth, a little bit of sky, a little bit of deep space. Really happy with this. So I hope you found this video informational. I think there's certainly a place for this liquid diamonds material in our trade here, our little churning hobby, business, whatever you do with it. You just got to find a good place for it. So anyways, thanks for coming.